So I'm Alexis Bonavitacola, and my job title, I'm happy to say, is an artist. I am also an online art instructor. And so an educator, teacher, artist, all rolled into one. I started dabbling in alcohol ink, which was my first venture into art in 2012. And then I began teaching online in 2015. So I work for myself. In 2017, I left brick and mortar education. I had my doctorate in education and I was a curriculum supervisor, past principal, and all of that. Nothing to do with art. In 2017, I left there because I actually had created an online art business. And so I am an LLC. I work solely for myself. You would consider me a solopreneur. I have a virtual assistant who helps me every now and then when I need additional help with my classes or setting something up. That's Isabel. And that's it. It's all me. I work for myself. I don't have to answer to anyone else. I work for myself, and there are positives with that. And of course, some areas that are probably not so positive. So I'm happy to go into those because it is a very solo career. Unless you're working in a place, perhaps like an art guild or a place that has a lot of studios in them. I would say for the most part, even if you have your own art studio, you're working by yourself. And so one of the pieces that I found that was a little difficult for me was this work in isolation as opposed to working with a group of people and leading a group of people and getting some feedback, back and forth from other people, because all my ideas are great because no one's telling me they're not. So, when you're just looking at the mirror, you're like, okay, I think that's a great idea. And maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. But that part, the social aspect of being an artist could actually be wonderful for someone thinking about going into this field, because maybe they are people that work best in isolation. And I am able to do both. And so I straddle that field really, really well. I'm a people person, and at the same time, I'm extremely comfortable working alone and teaching my online e-courses. So I do work for myself, and it's like if a course that I create doesn't work, I don't have a boss that tells me that it isn't working. So I don't have a bar, like that I have to supervise 80 teachers a year. I don't have that. It's my own bar. It's my own expectation. And I would say this profession is definitely a great profession for someone who is a self-directed learner. And I believe that more and more of us students, of course, we know from kindergarten on, with what happened last year, had to be very self-directed in their learning. And I learned that because I did my master's and my PhD online. So I had to really be that way. And I truly believe that is why I was able to go right into this business, because I really was very self-directed. I would say that it's a very interesting concept about artists, that we're not really good with numbers, or we're not that part, that logical sequential part of our brain. Like, you have this part of your brain, which is the creative part of your brain, and then you have this part of your brain, which is the organizational part and the systems part and all of that. To be an artist, you have to really have both. Like, you can't be in like La La Land and dreaming and just painting all day, because you have to eat. You have to buy things, you have to go to the store. And so the pros, of course, to me are that I set my own goals. I set my own yearly goals, financial goals for what I want to achieve. And some years I surpass those goals, and some years I don't, just because of things that are kind of going on around me. The pros are that I have my own space here. And when I want to paint, I just come into this extra bedroom. I had a studio outside of my home, but the idea of the studio was more, was greater than the actual idea, the actual part of going to a studio and, getting an Uber and going there and all of that. So a pro is that I'm surrounded by all of my art materials. I work at home. I set my own hours. I mean, that is really great. And I really just I don't have any hoops to jump through. And I'd say, I mean, there's a lot more pros than cons. To me, one of the biggest pros is that there's no end to my creative ideas. And in education, any organization, you can be limited sometimes by actually what you bring forth, or if you're in a union or any of those things. You can feel, oh, don't come up with that idea, that might be too much work for us. And so I am constantly coming up with ideas and innovative ways to think. And I just started a membership. And I just am, every year, I'm always thinking about, every year, like every few months, about what I could do creatively to make my business thrive. And so that's huge. It's a huge pro if you're somebody that likes to think creatively, and wants to be able to bring those ideas to fruition. And the pros are really what I want, what I spoke about. You definitely have to set some financial goals for yourself and meet them as well as you could. And that may be, if you're just starting out in art, it may be that you supplement your income by doing something else. I mean, we know all artists, sometimes will do that, have a regular job and do this on the side. I actually did this for 3 years before I actually left education, until I felt that I could do this. So it's not kind of, here's your dream, go for it. I think it has to be very strategically thought about, but don't give up on the dream. And the other part is, again, the pros of working in isolation and the cons of working in isolation, because I really miss sharing an idea with someone. I miss kind of critical reflection and kind of thinking about, like if I working on something or trying to help a teacher, and I just, working with the principal, and I'm working with other people, and we put our heads together and we come up with like the best strategies together. And so that part is the part that I miss. There are, in my opinion, there are a lot more pros in choosing a creative life. And there are cons that I think artists, writers, whatever, have gotten such a bad rap about, that's not true. Like, we're dreamers, and we have our heads in the cloud, and we're not realistic, and we're not that. None of that is true. I mean, none of that is true. I'm extremely realistic. And if you can balance, if this is a field that someone is thinking about doing, then it's important to kind of balance, as they say, both sides of your brain, where you can really put in those systems and those deadlines and those guidelines. I have great organizational systems that I use for that, or else nothing would get done. And so that part is important. The other part is the creativity and the ideas, and the going somewhere and looking at a piece of art and then being inspired by that. And then maybe you come home and you're not creating that piece of art, but you're inspired by those two colors together that you might never have thought would have worked well together. There's an old saying, like, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so when you're an artist, you look at things through a different lens. You look at things through a different lens. And so those are just probably touching the surface of the pros and cons of leading a creative life. So I don't have any formal schooling in art. I am a self-taught artist. And I have heard over and over again, I have a friend that is an amazing illustrator. And one of the things he said to me when he first saw a piece of my art was, he said, you don't know what rules you shouldn't break. So you kind of try everything. And that's wonderful. I mean, it is wonderful. And I've worked with, I have artist friends that have formal, schooling, and they've been able to bring in, I would say, more design elements into the art. So for instance, they have a real in-depth knowledge of composition. Perhaps they've had courses on drawing, and so many of those other pieces that encompass, like, draw the apple before you become an abstract artist. So all of those pieces encompass what I would consider a fine art education. Something that I feel has been left out and has been talked about over and over again is that no one teaches you the business part. They just teach you, like, here's how to be an artist, AKA a starving artist, which is definitely not true. But, you come out and you're in love with whatever, with whatever you're doing, and you continue to do that. But I think you have to work through the trials and tribulations of the business aspects yourself. And I would say that's probably true in any organization, Jennifer. I mean, you can have an MBA and you could come out learning project-based management and all of these good things. But I'll tell you what, it's not until you're in your own organization and you're managing your own team, and you're looking at all of those things, that you're able to say, okay, I have a background knowledge of that, but this is really what it looks like in real life. The books tell you this way to lead, but I've got this group of people. So for art education, the fact that I don't have a fine art background is probably something that's always been like a lingering piece for me, that I don't know if this is like really encapsulating this properly, but sometimes I create pieces and they come out really well. And I'm starting to understand more and more, because I take a lot of classes. But I feel like if I had that fine art background, I would know why. Does that make sense? Like, I would know why. So I teach I take courses on color harmony and composition and all of those things. And through over the years, I've now, of course, I teach it as well. I'm able to say, I know why that works, and I know why it doesn't work, but I didn't know that in the beginning. So for me, there's always been a little bit of that piece in there. Now, my educational background is that I graduated with a bachelor of science, I believe, in education, teaching. And then a few years later, I went on to get my master's of science in educational leadership. And that was all online. And then I'm going to say, I think it was 5 years ago already. So then I went on to get my PhD. So it is a very sore subject about the financial responsibilities to me in any form of education at this point, because it's so astronomical, you know, what you really need to pay for, to me, a PhD. Like it's just crazy. In the medical field, you can make that money back, you know, but as you know, and certainly a teacher or a principal isn't going to make that money back. So I'll be paying that for a really long time. But I think there's something to be said for having, if people are really interested in high school and college, and I didn't go back to college till I was 42, so I'm a late bloomer. But if people are really, you know, interested in that, I do think a bit of education definitely helps. It helps making you more confident in some of your artistic choices. I probably was always a bit creative. My brother is an artist and he is a fashion designer. I never did that. I never did that type of work, but I found that I designed children's clothes. I was a caterer, and I created like two types of businesses. So I always had, I wasn't a hobbyist or a crafter. I wasn't that at all. But I felt in some ways, whether it was the way I cooked or the way I thought about things, I felt in some ways that I was a creative person. I was definitely a creative thinker. And just how I was able to synthesize things and put things together. So when I was in certainly teaching, and then being a principal, I actually had nothing, no, like if you would have said to me like 20 years ago, you're going to be an artist, I would have said you're crazy. But I was living in New York City, I don't know, maybe 2008, 2009, and I took a watercolor class. And it was like a lot of fun. I, you know, took a taxi at that time, went up to this like artist studio on like the second floor with my watercolors, and I felt like an artist. It was just such a great feeling. And there were like 6 of us that Joan taught. And this is what I remember. So we were doing pairs or something like that. And she walked over as I was painting, and she said to me, "How long have you been painting?" And I said, "I've never painted." And she said, "But you are an artist. It's inside of you. So you are a painter." So they talk about that creative muse. And I really, from that point on, like somebody telling you, right, you kind of believed it. But I left, I painted 3 pieces. I left New York and moved to California. And I was like, I'm going to be painting those vineyards in Napa, California. And I never took out a paintbrush. I never took out a paintbrush. So I was not driven at all by that artistic sense. And then somewhere around 2012, a very strange story. I got an email from one of the women that was in that art class with me, who we were just kind of starting out. And she sent me this email where she was doing something in a medium that was called alcohol inks. And they kind of reminded you of watercolor, but they were more vibrant and they looked like stained glass. And so I reached out to her and I said, tell me about this. And she told me about this teacher. And I took a class online from her. And from like probably the second or third class, I was already like moving way ahead of what she was giving in the class. Like, okay, I want to do this now, and I want to do that. So I was in a Facebook learning community, her little Facebook learning community of about 50 people. This was in 2012. And I became kind of a pioneer of alcohol ink art, being seen as just not like a crafty thing. So alcohol inks, you would put them in a sponge, and there were a lot of crafters using alcohol ink for that. But I wanted to change it and elevate it a bit. I didn't even know I was elevating it, but evidently I was. And so I had a very defined style, and more people joined this Facebook group, and more people wanted to know how I did what I did. And so because I didn't know any better, I designed an e-course. I finished my PhD, and actually working in alcohol inks allowed my brain to respond differently creatively than I was actually needing to do in writing a research-based paper. So here I was, writing research. Nobody cared about my feelings until I had PhD in back of my name. So I had to learn to write differently. And it was just data, 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 data. And I started to play around with alcohol inks because I was like, I got to do something with this like right hemisphere of my brain, even though I know that's been disputed, but I need to do something creatively. And alcohol inks were that. Alcohol inks for me were fluid and all of that. And so in 2015, I designed my first e-course. I had an email list of like 128 people, and 68 off of that list took a course from me that I designed. And it was alcohol inks and encaustic waxes, and it had a lot that was involved in it. And I still have those same students that'll take any course with me. But after I did that for 2 years, not 3, after I did that for 2 years working full time, I felt my creativity in my brick and mortar job becoming less and less and less. There was less I was able to do in starting new programs. And I headed up the gifted and talented. I headed up the English as a second language. I headed up social studies. I headed up all these different departments. But education is narrow in many ways. And working with gifted and talented students, and my belief is that we're all gifted and talented, and that I would hope every child would have an opportunity to learn from that kind of curriculum that we created for gifted and talented, which was project-based and like working in collaboration, everything that we do in our real lives, instead of sitting in rows and working singularly. And like that disconnect of where what I really believed children should be learning in education, and how they should be learning, and what we should be doing to help them think creatively and work with others, and set goals for themselves. All of these things, it wasn't possible to do because you were in a very tight, focused, they could only move so much. It could only move so much. You had standardized testing, which is still in existence. And so even if teachers and principals and superintendents understood that children, adults, we are creative beings, and there are so many ways that light up our brains other than opening up a textbook and reading it. right? That could open up your brain too. I'm not saying it can't, but that ability to always go like back to the test, back to the test, back to the test. How's that going to help them with the test? How's that going to help them answering, fill in the blank questions, things like that. And so I just felt very disconnected from what I believed about what education should offer our students and to what was actually doable. And so that's why I left education, and I never really left education because I teach all the time. And so I've taught, I don't know, thousands of students that have taken various courses that I've had. And so if this, I think this is a question. So my background knowledge as an educator, my background knowledge as an educational leader, as a curriculum designer, as a reflective practitioner, all of it matters in my job today. And when I was working on my PhD, I had not at all ever thought about creating an online class. But lucky for me that the foundation of my PhD was on teacher supervision, and I decided to study adult learners, which are very different. And it's a great term, andragogy. So the study of, children is pedagogy, and adult learners is andragogy. And it's a very, very different field and a very interesting one to look up about how adults learn. And so I did tons of research on that. And so now I can actually, when things happen with my adult learners, I know why. I know why they have no patience. I know why they think they should be masters at something before they really put in the time, because they don't understand that they're picking up something brand new, like oil painting, and they've been able to do so many other things in their life. They don't understand this is so completely new, and they have to practice and they have to try, and they're not used to doing all of those things. They don't want to do it. They want to watch class and become a famous oil painter without putting in the time. But all of my background, all of my teaching background, everything that I've had to do being principal, every single thing that I had to do being a gifted and talented teacher, every single thing has been part of the knowledge base that I work with in my creative field. Well, one of them, which I said before, is being self-directed, because you're working mostly in isolation. And so I would say an essential quality is that you need to be self-directed. I would also say a characteristic is that you need to, how do I say this? When I think about thinking creatively, it's like not just having one right answer for something. And so you come to this field kind of looking at a lot of different things, a lot of different tools that you could bring in. So for instance, I started out in alcohol inks, and then I worked in encaustic wax, and then I worked in acrylics, and then I worked in collage and mixed media, and lots of different things. So one of the characteristics I think needs to be a risk taker, somebody willing to go down a different path than a lot of other people who kind of follow the straight and narrow. I like to say I'm going to break that rule, because I'm going to try painting that with a palette knife, or I'm going to use this spatula. And, I know that when I do that, I might be learning something different. I think another characteristic is to be okay with failure, which I'm not saying I ever have been, but I've always, I don't like to say challenge. So none of my students say challenge. I teach them to say it's an opportunity for growth because challenge sounds like this big rock that you have to like move. But an opportunity for growth feels a lot more freeing. Like the whole mindset of I'm not there yet, right? So in this profession, you are going to try a lot of things and they're not going to work. You're going to try some colors together and they're going to make mud. Or you have this vision in your head for something that you want to create and it doesn't turn out. And so what I've learned the hard way, is that as much as I love being an artist and a creative person, I don't define myself by that one title because I'm a wonderful grandmother and mother and wife and sister. I'm all of those things. And if they ever took like my paintbrush away from me, I'd still be that person. And so to me, one of the best things is to have a realistic mindset, right? You're going to make mistakes. You're going to go into this business. You're going to have, some great things happen, some not so great things happen. You'll feel successful. You won't feel successful. You're not showing up in a job. Here's the one thing to me about being an artist and having your own business and being like a solopreneur. If I wanted to, in my job in education, go in, let's say for a series of days and I was sick and I really wasn't at my best and I wasn't on, and I was just basically kind of just showing up that way, but not really showing up, nobody would take my job away from me and they wouldn't cut my paycheck, right? I'd still be part of the organization. But when you work for yourself, you have to show up. You have to show up. You have to believe that what you're doing is important, even if it's in your house or even if you're wherever it is. You have to really believe that what you're doing is worthwhile. So I always think of that I'm making a contribution to the world. I know that's like really big, but I like to think of it in terms like that I have a unique talent, that it's something that not everybody has, but it is something everybody can work towards. So I am not a believer. I will never be a believer that people are born with just innate, even though they told me that in my 40s. I don't believe that we just kind of like magically have this sprinkled over us. I have seen in my own experience artists who were like doing stick figures who now have their work in galleries. So it takes practice and patience and perseverance and wanting to do something. So nope, don't travel at all. I mean, my art in 2017 was in a museum about an hour away from here. And it was in a museum for 3.5 months, 26 of my pieces. And I traveled there, but my work is not in galleries. I actually just am putting out my first collection of work because I've been so focused on teaching and not selling my art. So no, I don't travel. My career path was a dual career path. And I would say for the majority of the time, my income only came from online classes. And so that's kind of different. I set a whole goal for myself at the beginning of this year that I would have a collection and I would sell those and I would continue to do that and have that bring in income. So for me, I I would say that that really depends. I think that just starting out as an artist, you have to find an audience, Instagram or, something like that. But you find an audience of people who are appreciating your art, and then perhaps you put your art for sale. And so maybe it takes like a few years to actually get known and kind of have a reputation. When you sell your art as a new artist, you're going to sell your art cheaper than somebody that's been an established artist, of course, right? So I have had years where I have made over three figures, and that was a combination of doing, still being in education and having my and doing my online courses. And then I think 1 year after that, it was the same. But in my field right now, there are so many e-course instructors that have flooded the market. So like when I started out in 2015, it was, different. And now there's just so many that you need to constantly be unique and be thinking about kind of multiple streams of income. And so right now for me, I'm trying to do that. I have a membership where people pay monthly, which is an amazing way to go. It's a very big trend. So they pay monthly to learn from me. And then I'm going to be selling my paintings ranging from $100 to $300 just in this one collection. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But I believe it depends on kind of where you live. Are you going to get your art in a gallery? Are you going to get your art, put up a tent in, in one of those art fairs, that we see? And are you going to be able to do that and have people come and buy your art? So that question is not an easy one to answer. So it's not like, I don't know, you can expect to make $150,000 if you go into law, right? So, or, this is the threshold of if you're a school principal. But hey, if I'm a school principal in New York, it's different than if I'm a school principal in another state. So there's just so many variables in what you can make. I think with artists, it takes a little bit of time. So it's not something you're going to come out with unless you're just amazing and brilliant and have an audience waiting for you. I think you have to put in the time, as any master artist has done. The kind of a bad rap. And the stigma is we have our heads in the clouds. We're dreamers. We're not realistic. This isn't seen as a real job. Like I tell my son, I know you don't think I have a real job, but I have a real job. And he said to me just last week, yeah, but Mom, the difference is you don't actually have to go to that job one day if you don't want to go. And I said, yeah, but I still have to. Whereas in his job, he can't, right? Like in a lot of jobs, you're showing up, like 9 to 5 or whatever it is. So I think that is the stigma. I think that is the stigma. Another interesting factoid is that a lot of people that have been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, ADHD, are very creative people. I've just been reading an amazing book about it. They're very creative people. They think, differently, but there's like the stigma attached, to that as well. You can't finish anything. You can't get anything done. One of the other stigmas, and I talked about this, is, well, I'm not good with numbers. So in those types of things, if that's a pro, it's probably an area that I could always use help on. But so I hire an accountant. Like I outsource. You can't be good at everything. So for those particular skill sets that I don't feel that I am strong in, or like there's the stigma, I honestly don't feel at all that I actually fit a stigma. And the reason is because I have a PhD, I had to work so hard and be so organized. And as I said, have so many systems in place and do that for 3 years and 9 months and be truly focused. That if I was this kind of woo-woo, airy-fairy, head in the clouds, kind of person, I I would never have been able to do that. So I straddle, as I said, both sides very, very well. Um, and if anyone kind of sees themselves falling into like not being able to finish things, or just being like all over the place, then there there are things that they can do and workbooks and techniques that they can learn to kind of help focus us. I mean, one of the things I think today that's hitting so many people, and that is this variable attention spans that we all have, because we're so used to being on our screens every 5 minutes, and it's never going to go away. So, I mean, listen, I'm 66. I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to say to high school or college students and young adults, oh, you shouldn't do that, because listen, I do it too. And this is the world. This is the world that we live in. We live on social media, and that is what we're doing, and we're multitasking, to say an overused word, but we're doing so many things, and that can and does help with lack of intentional focus on something. I know you're shaking your head, because it's so true. It's like people aren't really fully paying attention. They're not fully paying attention. So that could be a drawback, where if you like want to do this field, then know there are things that are going to be like eating away at your attention, as opposed to being in an office, right, with your boss next door, and you're like, you're not on Instagram all the time. Right? But when you're home, you can be, I guess, scrolling through. So, well, definitely about the financial part, I would say. And that is that you really need to be prepared. Like, I think in hindsight, I would have liked to have saved a bit of money to get me through when the times were difficult. Right. So I didn't have, well, I mean, who did? But I didn't have the foresight to like go, oh my God, we could get a pandemic and then my business could go down the tubes, right? I didn't have that foresight. The good thing was I knew how to teach online anyway, but I didn't have that level of foresight. And so that was kind of scary. I feel like that financial pressure and all of that was very scary. I also think that the one thing that I did say here, that I think is probably the number one thing, and I've said it in several interviews that I've really had, is to never define yourself by that one label. I mean, I wish somebody would have told me that. Like if a course didn't work out, that the course just didn't work out, right? That it was not just a total reflection that I was a failure as a teacher, that I was a horrible artist, that I was like, oh, all of this, the imposter syndrome, like all of that, right? I wish someone would have said to me, there are going to be times because when I started my business, everything was like rolling along, like, oh my God, you're, oh, look at all the people that want to buy your e-course. That's great. And so you kind of have this mindset that that's the way it's always going to be, right? The way it's always going to be. And what I really learned is, well, that's not life. That's just not realistic, because life is a series of ups and downs, and we better learn to ride the wave, or we'll just be like curled up in our beds in the fetal position, right? And so I wish somebody would have said that. This is such a great career, but along the way, you're going to have days when you feel like a failure and things don't work. It happens, and it's okay. And allow it, as they say, this too shall pass. You'll get back into your studio. You might feel paralyzed. You might feel like you have terrible artist block. You might feel like you're never going to get another idea, but they come. And sometimes it's walking away, going somewhere else, and sometimes it takes a little while. So I really think that ultimately for me, at this point in my life, what I really learned is that this is such a wonderful profession. I feel deeply gratified by the choices that I've made to do this and to teach other people. Oh my God, what a gift that is to teach other people. And it also has times when it doesn't really work that well. And then to me, it's just, okay, I'm going to ride that out. I'm going to ride that out because this is life, right? Like somebody told me a couple of years ago, not a long time ago, you have those times in our lives, like a whole year where you're like, are you kidding? One more thing? I can't believe it. Didn't I reach the quota of bad things happening this year? Right? So like you're looking at your life and like one thing happens, you get sick, and then another thing happens and all of that. But she reminded me, that even during those times, there are wonderful things going on in our lives. So I think back to like 2019, which was like a horrible year for like so many reasons, being sick and this and that. And yet my daughter had a baby and my daughter got married. And so in the midst of all of that, there are wonderful things happening. So that if you could just look at life like this kind of wonderful adventure, right? Take like the path that nobody's gone down, have a great time, take the risks, work hard, do all of that. If it's like the wrong path, open up another door and find another path to go down. But remember who you are at your soul and just do you. Don't be anybody else. Don't copy anybody else. Just do you. The more you do you, even when people go, but I don't know who you is, right? You find out who you is by practice and playing and doing all of those things. The more you do you, and the more your voice comes through on your work, kind of the better you feel about yourself. I just started doing this. So unless you think I'm a saint, I'm not. I begin every day with gratitude. And every night before I go to sleep, I write down 3 wonderful things that happened that day. Even if they're like, I sat next to my husband and we read a book. They don't need to be big. I made a great dinner, or like I finished my collection. They don't need to be big. But I honestly can say when we focus on gratitude, more gifts come in our lives. I mean, I would say that if you're interested in being an artist, don't have anybody talk you out of it. And, take classes and, take classes at night, or there's so many online classes, and you just Listen, you just never know. I mean, my granddaughter paints with me, and she's actually painted some of that painting, and she's 2.5. And then I have a woman in my class who's 74. I have older people too. And she wrote me yesterday, thank you so much, I'm learning so, she's taken a bunch of my classes, I'm learning so much from you, and I'm so excited to keep learning. And even though I'm 74, I have so much ahead of me. And so it's like, you're never too old and you're never too young. And if you have a desire, then kind of go for it and play with it and experiment. And if you want to learn how to draw, take drawing classes. If you want to learn how to be an abstract artist, I mean, everything is there for everybody today. And it doesn't mean you need to go to fine art school to do it, but it's kind of unlocking a different part of your brain. You know, when you can explore things differently. My husband's a writer, so I'm fortunate in that I kind of live with, someone who understands the creative life as well. So just if you're interested in it, there should be nothing stopping you. Nothing. It's all there for you. Like during my age, we had to take a course outside or we had to go to fine art school. But now, God, Skillshare, Udemy, Udemy, like there's like a $20 class and you can explore anything that you want to explore. So I think that's the beauty of the internet and the beauty of this global world that we live in, actually. So take advantage of it.